You can find me rolling like a stone, blowing in the wind down some highway, like smoke in the air on a Colorado breeze. Don't know how to come down. Doing fine with my head in the clouds and these boots, landing on some higher ground.
Did you go to that?
I did.
Oh, really?
I did.
Nice.
Yep, over at Nissan. I went to the Nissan show down here. He was like a stadium tour.
Nice.
Yeah, it was it was cool. He like went up. He had the yellow brick road, and he like disappeared off into the distance at the end.
Very much the showman.
Yes. Okay. Welcome everybody to the Higher Ground Podcast. Welcome back. This is episode 7. Today we're gonna revisit a song. We're going to do something a little unexpected today. We're going to revisit the song that we talked about on episode 1, Higher Ground. Normally, we would cycle through the entire catalog before coming back to another song, but kind of a very good reason sitting across from me, my longtime friend, Reaves Avery Washburn, is joining us on the show today to so that we can dive into his story, maybe help us break open the overarching theme of Higher Ground in another way, in a different way, knowing his story, which you're going to get to learn a lot about today. I think you'll agree that this is worth revisiting. So welcome, Avery.
If I live up to that, thank you. Thanks, man.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Buddy. We're drinking coffee today. Usually on the show we're drinking booze, but it's usually because we're doing like an evening thing. So I'm actually proud of this.
Well, we can switch maybe halfway through or something.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking when I was making us some coffee downstairs, I was thinking, me and Avery probably haven't shared coffee since maybe 2008.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know, when we were working on movies, and we'll get to that. Avery is one of those guys. I would say one of the most interesting men in the world, right?
Oh, shit.
A lot of things going on. Long and winding road. I think for both of us, for our journeys, he actually lives here in Nashville now. It's kind of wild how we met in the first place and how we're both in the same place today. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, man. Good. Yeah. Been busy, but having a good time, man.
Absolutely.
Just loving life.
Are you between? Tell the audience. Tell us what you do for work again, and why you're kind of rarely off at this time.
So I'm a television producer and production manager for mostly, pretty much exclusively, like adventure, remote location, wilderness type shows. A lot of Discovery Channel stuff, some Nat Geo stuff, that kind of thing. So I'm on the road most of the year. 9-10 months a year I'm somewhere that I don't live.
Right.
So, yeah.
Dude, and that's so wild that, well, because you're a homeowner here in Tennessee, and that's got to be, does it make you nervous? Or are you just kind of, okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, maybe he's just that way. Maybe he's just cool with it,
No, man. The house I have here in Nashville got burglarized when I was in Africa about 1.5 years ago. It was literally the day before I got back. I was there I had a 90-day visa. I came back on the 89th day. Mm-hmm. On the 88th day, some people broke, while I was actually in the air somewhere over the Atlantic, broke in and just stole all my shit, basically.
It would drive me crazy.
Sucked. Yeah. So ever since then, I've got Rings, doorbell cams everywhere. Like there's nowhere around my house that's not on video.
Right.
But Knox. It still makes me nervous because if I'm gone too long, like I'll get that alert on my phone that says battery is low. I'm like, how many days do I have left? When's my flight? Like, am I going to make it in time? It's almost like the burglars know when the battery's going to die, and then they'll just show up right then.
Seriously,
so,
man.
Yeah, it does give you a bit of anxiety being gone. Sometimes I wish I had bought a condo or something that was turnkey or whatever, but I don't know. I like having a yard. I like having space,
Yep. Dude, you can't get away from it. There's always some problem, you know. Like my whole thing is like, I don't want to be bothered with the, some of these necessities of life, like cutting grass and things like this. So I'm like, I need a zero maintenance as much as possible.
For me, that's one of my favorite things about coming home.
Right.
I got home Sunday. This is a Saturday, and I mowed my grass yesterday. It was like a foot tall.
Right.
And it's a zen thing for me.
That's good.
I love mowing my grass. I can put my headphones on and just like listen to music and just kind of like zone out. And there's that instant gratification too, because it's like this tall, and then all of a sudden it's gone. I'm like, I did that.
It's kind of like what was that thing called, a Zen garden, right? With a little, it's like a human-sized version of that. You know what I mean? But like the Zen garden, when you take the little, it's supposed to ease your mind, your nerves,
calm you, and
and that's what
relieve
cutting
the
grass
anxiety.
does for you. That's not the first time I've heard that. I don't have that, whatever that thing is. It might be a form of insanity. No, I'm just kidding.
That probably.
Yeah, no, but I've heard that from a lot of guys too. Yeah, no, I get that. So, well, that's great. I wanted to kind of just prep everybody before we dive into the song, like just how we know each other, because I think that kind of sheds light on what we're going to be talking about later, and why we're talking about it, and why I wanted to talk about it with you. Because as you all know, these first few episodes of the podcast here, I did on my own, but that is not the goal. The goal here is to bring all my interesting friends on here and see what we might be able to learn beyond the song itself. So the thing is, me and Avery went to college together. He's originally, as you all know, I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee. Avery is from East Tennessee. I'm originally from Chicago. Me and Avery went to school in Chicago. Columbia College, Chicago, to be exact. And we were maybe 1 year apart. I think he was 1 year ahead of me. And so maybe we wouldn't totally run in the same circles. And I can remember I got a call one day because I had worked with a cinematographer who I just had a lot of respect for, and I just always, would love to work with him as opportunities would present themselves. And I think maybe, I don't know exactly how that bridged us to working together, but I know that you were working on a very ambitious, very cool project that was the real deal as you could ever imagine, even with the projects that we would that were ambitious, that were coming out of Columbia. There were some, and we were kind of, I think a lot of students were wanting to push the envelope, but this was probably as far as you can go, like of what you can consider like a thesis film or something along those lines, right? And I just remember that cinematographer, Wes, he gave me a call and he's like, "Hey, you able to work on something?" He's like, "I think it's really cool." And I don't know what happened because it was kind of in progress already. The ball was already.
It was kind of rolling forward, and he was like, and it's one of my downfalls is I tend to try to do everything myself.
Oh yeah.
I try to take on too much, and Wes was like, "You need a producer, man."
Yeah.
I was like, it's fine. But I mean, this was a project that had like 5 main cast members. There was like a dozen locations. There was a gunfight at the end. There was a brawl halfway through it. All these stunts and all this stuff.
There's a dog.
And a dog. Yeah. Why make it? And also probably the second lead was a 8-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And so we got kids, dogs, guns, all this shit. He was like, you need to focus on doing your job, not doing everything. And so, and then he gave me your number and I called you and he was like, "Bring this guy on. He's a great producer. He's going to take a huge amount of the weight off of you." And that's exactly what happened. So,
man, it was, That was a real pleasure to be on that. I think at that time I was really looking forward to working, to being, something I think a lot of young folks could benefit from now is, creative problem solving, creative problem solving in a creative environment. I just thought it was really cool that you wanted to really take some cool risks. You didn't just do the easy thing. There were some complicated things involved that if you had the right team, then we could execute on that. And that's exactly what happened. I had a blast working on it. And it's just amazing how life goes, one little pivot. And then you have what was that? 18, 20. It's like over 16 year.
16. Yeah, we
friendship.
shot that in the January of 08.
Right.
January and February of 08.
I remember it was cold out. We were in like the alleys and stuff. There was just really cool locations in there. So that's how we met. And by the way, that movie, if you could still find it anywhere, My First Tooth, a really cool project. I'm sure it's online, isn't it?
The trailer is.
Okay.
I don't think the full thing is not online.
Okay.
I should probably figure out a way
release
to
it.
get it up on like Indie Flicks.
Or
one
like,
of those streamers that does short films.
Well, and
Or maybe just throw it up on YouTube at this point. I'm not going to make any money off of it.
Well,
So
what about-
I'll just throw it up there.
there's like Tubi and all those like different streaming platforms.
I think Tubi. I don't have Tubi, but I think they do short form stuff.
I think they do.
I think, yeah.
Possibly. Yeah, I think the world should see. I think the world should see all the stuff that we, take the time to make for the world. That said, had a blast. Honored to be a part of that project. That's how we met. And then what happened was time passed. Okay, here's that long and winding road I was talking about. You go to LA.
Yeah.
With
Shortly
a couple of
after
our,
we shot that, like,
oh yeah,
I moved there in June of 08, so like 4 or 5 months later.
right. And then you probably did your very last semester there.
Yeah, I did this semester in LA thing, and then
Yes.
just didn't leave.
Right.
For 13 years. Mm-hmm. So,
And then I followed you because like it was kind of a lot of our plans. A lot of us had that plan of like we wanted to go to LA right after.
well, back then you didn't really have much of a choice. It was either
Right. What
you
are we gonna do?
graduate and you either go to LA, New York. New Orleans was still a thing then, so a few people went there, but it was basically you go from Chicago, you either go east or west.
Absolutely.
If you wanted to actually have a shot at making a living.
Exactly. And I actually had an affinity for the town at the time. Like I thought it would be a cool place to be at the time.
Yeah,
I don't feel that way anymore, but
Yeah.
at the time,
About 6 months.
yeah, I really wanted to be there, and that's another story for another day how that turned out. But yeah, so you go to LA along with a number of our friends, and then I follow suit shortly after, and then I end up coming back. You stay, and you build your career over the next, let's say, like 10 to 15 years. That gets us a little closer to.
I lived from the time I lived there until the time I left. It was 12 and a half years. I was an LA resident.
Right.
Although I spent about 70% of that time somewhere else.
Right, because of what we're going to
I started doing travel.
Shows.
I moved there in 08 and I got my first like long road gig in 2010.
Right.
And then from 11, I was all there. And then from 12 on, I was most of the year on the road.
And are these all travel shows?
Pretty much. Some of them are, the show doesn't travel, but we travel to the show. The gig I'm on now is in Utah, and it's not a traveling show.
Right.
But we live out there on this ranch in Utah.
Right.
So
Interesting.
I'm traveling, the show isn't.
Got it. Right. So that 12 and a half years would bring us up to maybe the point in time when you moved to Chattanooga and continued traveling for work.
Yeah.
And then
I had gotten to a point where I didn't need to be out there. Plus it was COVID.
Right.
So that you didn't have to go to the office anymore
Okay.
during your like prep time or your rap weeks or whatever. So I was like, why am I paying all this money to rent a house, rent a shoebox? It was like twice the size of this room in LA, and I'm never even there.
Right.
And I was like, I'm just going to move.
Absolutely.
Parents were getting older and stuff. And I was just like, I want to be closer to home. And
Yep.
own a house instead of like a house instead of renting a 2-car garage.
Right.
So
Being a slave to the grind.
Yeah.
That's how that town's kind of set up, you know?
yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so then you get set up in Chattanooga, you continue doing what you were doing anyway. And then, how do you end up here in Nashville?
I mean, I love Chattanooga. I grew up on Mowbray Mountain, about 30 miles north of it. And Chattanooga is an awesome town, but I was 38 when I moved there, and I was or moved back there, and it's a great place. I mean, if you love I love outdoor sports and all that kind of thing, so it's great for that. But I was a 38-year-old bachelor, and it's a town that's more geared toward families, and that's a good thing. It's a great place to like raise kids and all that kind of thing. But I don't have kids. I wasn't married. I wasn't even seeing anybody at the time, and so I was like, Nashville is a little more single friendly,
Right.
I guess you would call it.
Right.
And so I was like, I need a bigger pond to fish in.
Well, I remember
So I moved up here.
What was so funny was Avery would because I have a lot of friends like Avery where in the case that we wouldn't see each other, it's one of those you pick up where you leave off type of things. But we never really I think we went through maybe one of those patches like once, but because then what ended up happening was I moved down to Nashville in 2017, and for whatever reason, I didn't really ask any questions. I just was like, oh, that's pretty cool that every December 31st, like every New Year's Eve, I would get like a 48-hour notice.
Oh, it was New Year's Eve.
Oh, it's New Year's Eve. Yeah.
Yeah.
For whatever
'Cause you used to
reason, I
host
always had
those,
this show on December 30th.
Yeah.
It was like almost like they gave me some recurring date. Like I wasn't like New Year's Eve cool, but I could get like the day before, And
Yeah, because when I was still living in LA, I would always be home for the holidays.
Yeah.
And I would always fly out of here because there was directs to LA, which you can't get out of Chattanooga where my parents lived. And so I would come up here on New Year's Eve, and I'd fly back to LA on New Year's Eve, like that morning, because it's cheap.
Right.
That's the cheapest day. Before and after is way more expensive. You fly on New Year's Eve, it's way cheaper. So I'd get one night in Nashville every year, and it was December 30th.
That's interesting.
And yeah.
Okay.
And you just happened to have your like songwriters thing you were hosting every year. And I was like, oh, this is a kind of a cool tradition.
Absolutely. No, yeah, it turned out real cool. And then you ended up being like, I'm actually moving here. So that was cool. And so it's been pretty cool ever since. We get a lot more of that time, to hang and everything. So if you haven't figured it out yet, you could see maybe why I wanted to dive into higher ground today. Avery was, I asked Avery to join us, kindly accepted, and I thought maybe I would help out and be like, sometimes the guest will pick the song that we kind of crack open, but I was just like, I think Avery is a higher ground kind of guy. So if you know that, I mean, let's just look at the album Higher Ground, or the album Black Sheep. The first song on there is Higher Ground, and it's actually the only reference to Black Sheep on the record lyrically. And the thing is, it's just, as we've talked about before, it's one of those songs about living life on your own terms and kind of living in that free spirit mindset beyond your early years, beyond when it's easy to do so, where it's more of at some point it becomes clear that that's just who you are, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about you, whenever we're catching up, we're like, trading stories in recent memory. You always got some very interesting things going on, so I want to get into some of that. So I think we're caught up. Audience knows why we're here, why we're sitting here. The song Higher Ground, I immediately think of somebody like yourself when I think of this song. If there's somebody that embodies living life on your own terms, being independent, having that free spirit, not just when it's easy, but just because that's who you are on the inside. Do you agree? Do you think that I'm kind of like pegging you on that one a little bit?
I think so. Yeah, I think, it takes, I guess, if you're going to live an unconventional life, you have to, everything's a double-edged sword, and you kind of have to, you got to take the good with the bad. And I think it just comes down to a matter of coming to terms with yourself and what you want. And there's some things you want that you're not going to be able to do if you are going to live that kind of, or any sort of unconventional life. It all costs something. But then I guess you kind of have to look at the alternative and say, would I even be able to do that?
Right. And
for me, the answer has always been no. I'm not a guy who's into routine. I can't. I worked in like 20 something restaurants in college. Because literally like the shortest amount of time I ever worked at one was like 2.5 hours.
Right.
Because the longest I think was 6 months, because I would just get bored. I would get tired of it, and I'd just quit and go down the street and just work at a different one. Because why not? I mean, once I've learned everything in a place, I'm kind of done with it.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, well, screw it. I'll just, I'll just move on.
That's very interesting. So, yeah, you kind of hit on something. So very early on in your life, you're finding that you kind of live in a box, as we all do growing up, and then it's a matter of how do we get out of that box. But before we figure out how to get out of it, you're kind of going from the box A to box B, but they're very similar.
Yeah.
It's more like box A and box A2. And like you say, it's like, that's very interesting what you said. Once I figured
I just
everything
didn't like
out about box A,
yeah, you're
like, I need to go to, the next box. But isn't that just, that's...
I think it's a need to change your surroundings frequently, or at least for me it is. I think you just need that sort of like external stimuli to keep you interested.
A variety.
And if once there's nothing that will surprise you or nothing that interests you in your environment anymore, then there's certain kinds of people who just move on.
Right.
That's why I do what I do for a living, and it worked out because like I'm one of those people. You always see those jokes on like old sitcoms, or like the mother-in-law is like, "Oh, he can't hold a job," and I'm that guy. I can't hold a job.
Right. You're like the vagabond.
But I've had my same kind of job for 15 years now, because it changes. I go somewhere for a couple of months, do a thing, and then go somewhere else that's completely different, do another thing, and it's just long enough to keep me interested, and then move on. It's sort of like, what's the line in the song? Never been somewhere long enough for anybody to miss me.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is. I go somewhere, do this thing that's very intense for a limited period of time, which is great because having those kinds of experiences with people in those places, or with the people that you travel with, you make these really tight connections and these tight bonds with people, but then you move on.
Right.
So you just like leave on a high note,
bittersweet,
exit on a laugh, that kind of thing. It's like, it's one of those kind of things where you can develop these really close friendships with people and close relationships with people all over the world, and then get gone before you get tired of each other. Kind of thing. And so, yeah.
That might say something about relationships too. You know what I mean?
There's that too.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm a big Tony Robbins fan. I bring him up from time to time, as you know, but he talks about the 6 human needs, right? And you're kind of touching on a couple of those needs that there's no right or wrong with those things, right? It's just,
I'm not familiar with it.
Kind of makes you who you are. Well, so there's, let's see if I can get them all. There's certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, growth, and contribution. So those 6 needs are 6 needs that we all have, but they're all weighted differently depending on the individual, and that's what makes one kind of way of looking at an individual as their own person. And so it seems like you value uncertainty kind of pretty high, which spoiler alert.
I do
that's
like to know
thing.
that I have another paycheck coming. I like that certainty.
So
like that.
See, everybody's got a little bit of some, everybody has a little bit of all of them, but some of them are more, I would call like evolutionary, right?
Yeah.
Or more growth oriented. So I think you touched on a few of those things. Again, growth is one of those needs. I think you value growth pretty high.
Yeah.
Uncertainty, you also are touching on that, at least with this side of your personality. So, yeah, no, I think that's interesting, and I think that's why we relate to each other. I think we're both kind of risk takers in our own ways, and so no, I totally get that desperado vagabond thing. Obviously, we talk about it a lot. Speaking of,
Oh yeah.
the new
Quick
DVD,
plug.
Desperado Volume 2. But yeah, man, that makes a lot of sense. Talk about, because some of this stuff is crazy, at some point you were going to Africa. What was that about?
I've spent, I think, if you add it all up, I've spent over a year of my life in Southern Africa, mostly South Africa, but also Zambia, one brief stint in Botswana. But yeah, we go there. I do this show called, one of the shows I do is kind of my bread and butter the last 7 or 8 years is called Naked and Afraid. And there's like 8 incarnations of the show, 8 spinoffs or whatever. And so we go there all the time. It's my personally favorite place to shoot, and probably the place that we've done the most episodes, shows, etc. And I love Africa. The Afrikaners, all the people that we work with there, the locals are some of the coolest people on earth. And it's weird when you move around a lot. And it's interesting to experience different cultures and all that sort of thing. But sometimes, every once in a while, you'll get somewhere you've never been, and you feel like you're at home.
Right.
And that's what it was like when I got to South Africa the first time.
Wow.
It was like, these are like my people. Like,
That's wild.
We just I just kind of like fit right in there, and I felt at home, even though I'd never been there. And I'm seeing all these animals and environments. Obviously, I've never seen. I've never seen an elephant in the wild until I got there, and then one of them chased us down a highway. But it's as foreign as it was, I felt completely at home and just relaxed there.
Yeah,
and yeah, it's probably my favorite place on earth.
Did you ever imagine, when you decided I'm going to be a television producer, let alone when you're much younger and it's like, well, right. So, but let alone when you were like, I want to be in filmmaking or television or something visually creative on some level. That's why you ended up at Columbia, right?
Yeah.
So when you made that decision, you obviously, like, I know, in general, probably what was in your mind is probably what was in all of our minds, right? Of something far more conventional. Or at least ideas of what a filmmaker was or what a television producer was. Both very different in their own right. But now we're in like left and right field, like 5 stadiums away.
Weird. Like, I moved to Chicago and subsequently to LA wanting to be basically Paul Thomas Anderson.
Sure.
I wanted to be this like writer director of important, cerebral, independent, like not super low budget, but like mid-budget movies.
Yeah.
And because I love that. I'm a huge P.T. Anderson fan still to this day. He's my favorite working director right now. But I had no idea that I was going to end up doing these like adventure wilderness shows. It just sort of happened. I just sort of fell into it. Yeah. It was I don't know. It was weird. I just kind of took the opportunities that were presented to me at different times and just sort of said yes to everything.
Right.
Mainly because I had a shitload of student loans and I just needed to keep working. And that's just sort of the way it went. I mean, I grew up in the woods. I'm comfortable in the wilderness. I always have been. I just never intended to do that for a living. But there's a lot of shows that kind of fit that bill where that skill set is useful, and not a whole lot of people that do it. It's a tight-knit group. Like we all pretty much know each other. Or at the very least, there's 1 degree of separation. If I don't know you, I know somebody who knows you. And so given that there's not that many people and a whole bunch of shows, it's like I just sort of like went that way. And I was never a traveler. I didn't grow up traveling. Like I had never been west of Texas until I moved to California. I didn't leave the country until I was 30. That was my first time outside the U.S.
So that's a lot of uncertainty for you.
Oh yeah,
Like more than most.
yeah. I mean, I didn't grow up traveling. It just wasn't something we did. On vacations, it was like we went to grandma's house in Virginia and North Carolina, and it wasn't like. It's just not the way that I grew up. And so it wasn't something that ever even occurred to me. I mean, I liked, the Anthony Bourdain show and all that stuff, but I never thought of doing it, that kind of thing for a living, because it just, the bug bit me late. Yeah. Or I realized the bug even existed late. And so, but then I just kind of just dove in head first. I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do now. Yeah. And I want to do as much of it in as many places as I possibly can. That's very cool. Yeah. And I would have to say, again, my whole point there was that nobody in their mind, when they think of television producer, is that, like that is not what the role looks like. And, you've kind of redefined that role in a lot of ways, where it's, you've made it totally fit this kind of independent, free-spirited thing. It's a very cool thing. Wild. So you said something in the middle there. You said, say yes to everything. Well, that's a huge, within reason, right? Yeah. I mean, not I may have said it and just overstated. Right. Well, but I mean, it was just as a principle, as a lesson, not as like a hard and fast rule. That's, I think, a really important part of being able to get outside that box. If you're somebody that lives inside of a box and you're trying to get out and you're trying to, live life on your terms, that would be, that would help, right? Yeah. Doing things that are uncomfortable, allowing yourself to be uncomfortable. Yeah. Right. I think it's adaptability. That's the main. If you start taking opportunities that are in front of you and not being like paralyzed by fear or uncertainty, then you, by necessity, have to become more adaptable. So the more situations you put yourself in that I wouldn't say they're uncomfortable, but maybe unfamiliar, you just get better at adapting to any situation, and then that sort of compounds itself. The more you do it, the better you are, and then the better you are, the more you want to do it. Yeah. And so I think that's really like probably the most important skill to acquire. Of the acquirable skills, I think adaptability is probably number one when it comes to just living the way you want to live. And that's one that can be learned. It's not like one of those things, you know what I mean? It's not like you don't have to be born. It's not a gene, right? No. You can actually it's a skill. It's an acquired skill. Yes. Whereas like I think something that maybe pushes people in the direction to begin with, and I don't know, I'd like to hear what you think, but I would say there's like an innate curiosity to certain people. And I don't know if it's innate or if it's something that is acquired. I'm naturally curious about just life in general, so I never really had to work at that. Right. But it's not to say that people can't work at it. It's just, it came easy to me just to be curious about things. I'm never really, any situation I'm in, I don't really get bored. I know I said I was bored, like when I got bored, like working at a restaurant, that's why I left. Right. So I'd be not bored anymore. And so, but I don't, I don't know. I can find something anywhere to interest myself. Even if it's like a while back, I was at this, it was not in the wedding, but I was going to this wedding and we were at one of the groomsmen's house, like everybody's getting ready and stuff. I forget what they were talking about, but it did not interest me at all. And I found myself like staring at this end table, trying to figure out the joinery that the carpenter used to put it together. And I was like, would have been bored, but I found something in the room that interests me. And I don't know. That's just a good habit to be in. I don't know if it's a habit or if it's just the way I am. But
I agree. I'm wired similarly. But I think this is how I think it works, is that, you have the people, if you kind of break everybody up into two groups, of the people that would normally chase that stuff and the ones that aren't maybe geared that way as much. I think you brought up curiosity, but you also brought up something I wanted to talk about. I wanted to ask you about, which is fear. I think maybe the answer to your kind of thought is, in my opinion, is the people that maybe haven't gone out and chased what they maybe desire deep down yet.
Yeah.
I think their fear is a little stronger or a lot stronger than their curiosity. I do think so many people are curious by nature. I think that's why you have things like the internet, or not why we have the internet, but why there's so much value around things like TikTok and just search engine
on TikTok, but I've seen it.
Yeah, like search engine usage in general, meaning you have a lot of people that are like acting as flies on the wall. It doesn't take any.
Yeah.
You don't have to. Anybody can do that. That doesn't take any skill.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why Influencers of the Wild is such a wildly successful channel.
Because people are curious.
Page.
They're curious. They don't want to necessarily do the stuff, but they're happy to watch.
That one maybe builds people's fear a little.
Absolutely.
A little too much.
Absolutely.
But it is hilarious.
Right. But yeah, I think that might be what it is though, is when your heart's in the right place and you are just trying to broaden your horizons and spread your wings a little bit, that fear can sometimes is always the thing that causes some paralysis.
Yeah.
To your curiosity.
I mean, fear is a good thing.
If you use it
otherwise,
that way.
Yeah, if you use it right. It's just, I think it's a matter of kind of analyzing a situation. It's judgment. Yeah. Like life takes judgment, and people with, quote, no fear don't usually live very long.
Right.
So, it's like.
But if you can learn to use it as like almost a signal, right? Like I've heard people talk about, being able to dance with the fear instead of like running from it. It's not that you want to close the door on it so you don't have to see it. It's not that, but if you can kind of face it head on and kind of see it for what it is, and what does it say about you? Is this what I'm afraid of? Is this an opportunity to grow? Or is this a valid thing that's like trying to save my life here? Because fear is a good thing. I agree with you. It can be used to save your life, but people like yourself, and I like to think people like myself, we also will look at the fear right in the face and be like, okay, let's take a step back here. Is this trying to help me right now? Is there a gift here? Is there a lesson here? So I wanted to ask you, in your line of work, I can imagine in a variety of ways, sometimes in a more cerebral sense and sometimes in a more physical sense that, do you run into fear quite often in your line of work in such an uncertain area of work? And how do you deal?
It happens quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what?
Like what you were just saying, for example, we spent months on end in the African bush, and there's elephants, there's lions, there's crocs in the water, there's black mambas, there's a million things that
Apex
will
predators.
kill you. Yeah.
Right.
And but you don't let fear keep you from going there at all.
Right.
But at the same time, you do let fear keep you from doing something stupid, like walk off by yourself. No one, you're not allowed to walk off anywhere by yourself.
Right.
We have rangers with us who have rifles, and anytime we're going on a hike or anywhere, even if you're just going to take a piss, you tell the ranger, hey, I'm going to go 10-1 over there. And they'll look and make sure, because these guys have like a sixth sense. They have like these eagle eyes. They can just look at an environment where you or I wouldn't be able to pick anything out, and they can see things that we don't see. And so I would say there's the line. Like, don't let fear stop you from going and exploring.
Right.
But do it smart. Be with a trained marksman or professional hunter who knows who knows what he's doing, and make sure that, you follow the rules. Those rules, because those rules are in place to keep you alive.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the balance.
Right.
Do things that are maybe a little daring, but don't be stupid.
Well, and how do you even said you're somebody that didn't grow up traveling. And that's something that you picked up later in life. Well, it's hard to pick up new things later in life. So how did you get past, I'm sure there had to be some fear around that, just of uncertainty, the what ifs. Sometimes it's not the most rational fears, but we have them anyway. We all have them. So how do you get past things, especially like in adulthood, kind of these growing fears or these sleeping giants that, sleeping giants, I'm talking about fear there, things that you didn't have to deal with, but then all of a sudden you're 30 years old, or you're 35, or you're 40 years old, and it's like, I didn't know I was scared of this. How am I going to deal with it now? Like, how do you deal with things like that?
That's a good question, because I think for a long time I just kind of didn't. I just kind of kept my head down and kept going. I was like, this is one foot in front of the other, that kind of thing. I mean, I guess that maybe in a way that's dealing with it, but I don't know. It is, but then eventually, like you say, when you get 35, 40, eventually when you get older, you kind of have to get outside yourself a little bit and consider more what's happening to or with other people in your life. True. Part of the reason I moved back to Tennessee, my parents are getting older. There were several years when I was in LA where I literally went Christmas to Christmas, and that was the only time I saw it. And now, I wanted to be closer to home. I mean, I'm still on the road a lot, but when I'm not, I'm within 2 hours. So, we can spend more time together and see my family more often, help them with stuff around the house, that kind of thing, So I guess, once you get a little older and like relationships, I've lost several relationships to being on the road. Yeah. It's one of those things where women kind of, they think it's cool. It's, they see like pictures of you doing all this like Indiana Jones shit. Yeah. But then they want you to stop doing it. Right. Once you're with them. And then, but, my mom. Fortunately, now the girlfriend I have, she's also a traveler. She's an international citizen of the world type too. So she gets it and doesn't put that pressure on me, which is, I think that's why it works. So part of the reason.
I've totally ran into that before as well. I think the quote is, the thing that you fall in love with somebody for ends up being the thing that you resent them for.
Totally.
And as a traveler, as a creative person, as a musician, as people who are very, driven by nature. Oh yeah. When you're not going to be home at that conventional time, and when you're, when you shut this off at a conventional time, it's just wired a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah, because then even if you do that or make an attempt at it, at some point I feel like in the back of their mind, at some point, they're like,
he'll settle down.
He blames me for pulling him out of that life that he had before. And, yeah. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
So I think at least for me, it was finding somebody who was already similarly aligned,
wired that way. Yes.
And so, yeah, because at the end of the day, I don't think you can change people.
You can't.
I mean, you can change their habits, maybe, like people who have whatever bad habits, addictions.
Yeah.
I have some bad habits.
Same.
And I'm trying to break them. She's trying to help me break them. But that's a habit is not the essence of who you are.
Yes. You can't change an essence.
Yeah, you can't change someone's
if we
core.
decide like, I'm just, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live this way anymore. We can change that. That's a challenge in and of itself. But yeah, no, I totally agree. So I have a treat in tow that for
excellent.
us. Yes. But before we get there, I want to talk about one more thing as it relates to fear. I think fear can play such a detrimental role when it comes to being this free-spirited, independent, unconventional person, especially as it relates to what we do for a living and what we do as it relates to our passions and things. Don't you think that, we talked about fear and kind of powering through and getting past that and, finding our own approach to getting past that. But life is a funny thing, I've been saying this a lot lately, but nobody said life was fair, right? It's not like you can solve all the current problems in your life and you won't run into new issues tomorrow, right? Or a couple years from now, or maybe a few months from now, right? It's a moving target, right? So as we age, it only makes sense that we run into new fears. I know with my life, the way my life is structured, my life looks a certain way, but if I next year, and I know like last year, my fears around the pieces of my life, they're changing. They're ever changing. Like my risk tolerance is changing.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe as I get older, I get a little more conservative in my risk tolerance. Yeah. I want a little bit more structure. We're talking about certainty. I want a little bit more foundation than I had last year. When I was 18, I didn't even know what foundation was. Right?
Yeah.
I think Matthew McConaughey says it best. He says, liberal early, conservative late. And he's not talking about politics there. He's just talking about kind of keeping yourself safe, giving yourself some rails, right?
I would add to that. I think I've heard someone, this isn't my thought, I heard it somewhere else, but it's liberal early, conservative middle, liberal late.
Oh, okay.
Just it's like that middle age, I guess. People like kind of tighten up because this is when they're having families or trying to have families. It's when they're building most of their future. And then once you hit a certain age, it's like, I've done what I'm going to do. Like, and they just, that's why, And then they kind of like loosen up a little bit. It's why grandparents are cooler than parents.
Agreed.
It's,
That's, I couldn't agree more. So with that said, how are you dealing with the new fears that you come across with? And, how old are you now?
42.
42. So that's got to feel different than 38
it just like hit me. Like I didn't change at all when I turned 30. Like not one bit. In fact, I probably went more, like I said, I didn't leave the country until I was 30.
Right.
And so like that whole decade I was more like what I guess most people do in their 20s.
Yeah.
I'm like a decade behind everybody.
Got it.
And so, but then when I hit 40, I felt, not physically, I still feel great.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, I'm actually getting older now.
Right.
This is just,
I
was like, oh, it's time to like, maybe not do that rock star lifestyle as much.
Right.
And just try to like, like you said, I'm kind of craving a little bit more of that stability, the instability or the certainty.
Yeah.
Because it's, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that I turned 30. Right. And if I can blink and I'm going to be 50 and then I'm going to be like, oh, then there's no, I don't want to say you can't like change after that, but it's better if you start building that backup plan, that option or safety net.
Right.
Sooner rather than later.
I don't think any of us can outrun our own mortality, even in mind.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. So with that said, we're still free thinkers. We're still independent. We still want to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
But I think what we find is that we just need somewhat of a safety net so we can still like pretend we're really spreading our wings, without a net. Of course there's a net. Because again, the people that are truly fearless are dead, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think safety net sounds like a conservative thing, and I guess in a sense it is, but there's still a way to live life in an unconventional way and do interesting things.
100%.
You can build an unusual safety net. Like I'm looking to try to get off the road a little bit more so I can spend more time with my girlfriend. Mm-hmm. But the way we're looking at doing that is buying a farm in France and basically homesteading.
Yeah.
So, it's not like I'm going to go work at an insurance company in a cubicle. It's still an unconventional thing, but it's not what I've been doing.
Right.
I've never been a farmer. My papa was a farmer. That's
exactly
about last time I worked on a farm, I was like 9.
Right.
But I'm going to learn it.
It's a long way from East Tennessee.
Figure out how to do that.
Seems unconventional to me.
Yeah.
Again, like you said.
But it still would be stable because we just be there together living in this place and, have some routine, but not the routine that everybody has.
Just a way to continue to make that lifestyle work, that way of being.
Yeah.
Because again, it's different for everybody. Yeah. So yours looks different than mine. It's like I'm over here trying to figure out how to be able to profit from music and have it be able to sustain not only my life, but also provide the ability to create more music. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's some creative, again, going back to creative and critical thinking, you know what I mean, going on. To make something like that, you don't figure that stuff out overnight, right?
Oh, no.
So
I remember I heard Garth Brooks talking about it once when he was telling a story when he was like 18 and he was telling his dad or something that he wanted to be a musician. His dad said something like, you'd have better luck trying to rope the wind than make a living as a musician. I'm not a musician, so I don't know firsthand, but I have family and lots of close friends who are, and it's like, it's an admirable path to take because it's not easy, but it's being true to yourself and what makes you tick and what motivates you every day. And I think anybody following that who's willing to fight for it and to sacrifice for it, that's an admirable thing. I
appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Respect for that.
Yeah, man. It's a good thing it's fun because it sure is difficult. And we do all these other things that are less in our nature to be able to, as a sacrifice. Everything's got sacrifices, right?
Yeah.
So, it's definitely, nothing's perfect. It's not like sunshine and rainbows. None of that going on, but it is a lot of fun. Yeah. So, I think that's kind of that lifestyle, right? It's like, in that song Higher Ground, we don't talk about like why the lifestyle's why that lifestyle is difficult, but at the end of the day, I think it is. I wanted to, as we got a treat. We got a treat here.
All right. What we got here?
Here you go.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. This one's from me. The show is not sponsored by Evan Williams, 1783 Small Batch, but I want to just give them a nice little plug. This is $19.99 at the liquor store.
Really?
It's a small batch.
Wow.
It tastes as good as a lot of stuff.
That's quite reasonable.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I told you about this one because, yeah, $20 is nothing, and you got, I'm a big
not for a small batch bourbon
Woodford fan, and that's
me too.
The non-small batch, it cost you, 60, somewhere between 40 and $60.
Process.
Yes, sir. All right. I don't know what I poured there because I didn't bring the shot glass up, but it doesn't really matter.
All right.
Cheers, buddy.
Nostrava.
This is to living on your own terms. Yeah, buddy. I know you wouldn't complain if I
That's
over-poured
nice.
a little bit.
Yeah.
So, as we wind down here, Avery, we've touched on a lot of topics. I wanted to ask you, what are the 3 things, and we may have touched on some of this already, but I wanted to ask you, what are 3 things that you need to be able to live life on your own terms?
I would say, well, I think 2 of them we touched on, which is that curiosity. Whether it, I don't know if we came to a resolution. I don't know if there is one.
Like an insatiable
just
curiosity.
to want to constantly learn and to experience new things. It's not just mental curiosity. It's physical. It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's, you just want to collect experiences.
Right.
And I don't know if that's born in or it's innate or if it's something you learn. Maybe it's both. I don't know. Different for everybody, but I'd definitely say that. I would say adaptability, because if you're going to follow that curiosity, you're going to be in a whole bunch of places that you're unfamiliar with.
Right.
You have to learn to, and this I believe is 100% teachable or it's a learned skill.
Yeah.
You can teach yourself. Somebody can teach you.
Right.
But yeah, being adaptable, just being able to be comfortable in pretty much any environment, to analyze situations, one, to keep yourself safe, but also to just, to make good decisions. Because especially when you're a traveler, you're going to end up in a lot of places where things can go good or they could go bad. You just need to have your wits about you. And so I would say adaptability. And the third one, I guess it kind of ties to the adaptability, but I would say self-reliance.
Yeah.
And part of that is being a generally capable and intelligent person. But part of it's also the ability to be happy with yourself. And because you are going to, when you live a completely different life than most of your peers, you're going to end up alone a lot. So you have to be kind of okay with being by yourself. Like I've done a lot of solo trips. I've traveled solo a lot, or just even when you're home, sometimes you're not part of the group that is always, even if they're your friends, it's like they have this whole life going on while you're away for months or doing your own thing or whatever you're doing. So you're, like we were talking about, kind of like a permanent visitor.
Right.
So you're sort of like this, there's a level of detachment that comes with it inherently. And you have to be okay with that. Some people, I think that might actually be the biggest hurdle for most people. A lot of people are curious, and a lot of people, when put in a situation, can be adaptable. But I think the ability to be
to loneliness.
To loneliness or I don't know. I mean, I don't even loneliness.
Not in a negative way, but
but the ability to just be okay with being different.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people. I think that might be the biggest hurdle.
Yeah,
because a lot of people aren't. People want to fit in.
Yeah.
Many people, at least.
Yeah.
Most, I would say, they want to be part of the group.
Well, and wouldn't you agree that as many friends as we have and as many people as we're close to, and just, both coming from awesome families and stuff, it can be, I I think you can't feel alone quite often while you're chasing that dream. You know, while you're going down that path of living that dream. You know,
Yeah.
I experience it quite often where I just don't have somebody to talk to. You know what I mean? About
I don't know how many times when I've come home from whatever 2 months in the Amazon or something, more so when I lived in LA, but now too. And I would come home to that 2-car garage that I called a house.
right.
And I'd drag all my shit in. And I'm covered in bug bites and my beard's out like this.
You're
And,
right.
You know, and I'm just like haggard and dead tired. And it's empty. And I'm just like, well,
And
like, what
nobody-
do I do now?
and
you
nobody-
know?
you
Just
know,
like
and if you-
here by myself.
Right. And if you, but the thing is, like, if you wanted to, if you even had the right words to articulate what was, you know, in your mind,
No,
most people wouldn't understand it.
exactly. It's like, then you walk down the street to 7-Eleven or something, and it's like you're walking past all these people, and they're like, you're just thinking, these people have no idea
Yeah.
what I just did.
I don't even know. Well, even our
Not
parents.
that they should.
Even
I'm
our-
just
even
saying
our
it
parents.
makes you feel like a stranger.
Yeah.
You are a stranger, but it
Yeah.
makes you feel like you don't belong in the place that you live.
Yeah.
It's-
Absolutely. Even in your own, again, even in your own community, whether it be parents, friends, close friends, even friends that have adjacent lifestyles.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's, you know, you could tell me what you just went through and what your mindset is, and I'd be like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll hear you, you know, but it's like,
But you could, you could try to tell me what it's like
Right.
when you get off stage and like the crowd loves you. I have no idea.
Or
I'm not
when
a
it's
musician.
painful.
I have no
Right.
idea what
Right.
that feels like. I can try to imagine it, but
well, just
you know?
or the pain, you know, that goes along. Again, we don't do this stuff because it's easy. We do it because it's the wins are that good. I think, but there's a lot of pain that goes with it.
yeah.
You know, so anyway, yeah, I just think you make a great point. Self-reliance, and yeah, I was watching a Hall of Fame speech the other day, and I just remember somebody using the phrase. That's why I said it, because you triggered it out of me. But giving yourself up to loneliness. It's not that you become this lonely person that's alone all the time. It's just like kind of spiritually, or I don't want to use that word, not spiritually alone, but like emotionally alone. That thing that you can't put your finger on, but you feel the part of you that feels disconnected from the people closest to you.
Yeah. There's a
You know what I mean?
detachment. It's almost like you're an observer
Yes.
floating through these spaces where
Yeah.
it's like at the wedding I was talking about.
Yeah.
You know, it was
Yes.
like all these people hang out together all the time.
Yeah.
And I know them, but I just come through for that like day or
Right.
that weekend or whatever.
Right.
And I'm just like, and then I'm gone. But
And it's
then
not
they're
your
all still
world.
together. And it's
Right.
like, I just kind of float through and, I'm
Yeah.
like, and then I'll just keep going
Yeah.
on down the river or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, one more question for you. Well, maybe two more questions for you. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Travel, now, as of age 30, right? You've been some wild places. For the audience here, wanted to see maybe if you could rattle off the top 3 travel destinations that, you know, they might not be considering. Or the
Okay.
wildest things, you know, that you think are exciting.
Well, like we mentioned earlier, my favorite country to visit in the world is South Africa. I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people haven't been, like, who maybe go to Europe a lot or, you know, South America sometimes because it is so far, but it's not that bad. It's get to Atlanta and then you have a 16-hour flight direct, boom. And it's amazing.
And where you
go to
flying
the
into?
Kruger, usually Joburg, but some days of the week you can get one to Cape Town, which is where I would recommend going. So I would go to the Kruger to see the wildlife and everything. But then if you're going to go to a city, which I highly recommend you do, it should be Cape Town. Cape Town is one of the best cities in the world. The architecture is beautiful. The food is amazing. The people are super cool. We usually stay down in Muizenberg, which is 15 minutes from the middle of the city. It's a little beach surfer community, little beach town, and it's really cool.
Cool.
Yeah. So I would highly recommend South Africa, number one.
Wow.
It's my favorite country to visit. One that most people don't know, I was in Bulgaria for about a month in 2019. And Bulgaria is awesome. We were in the mountains. We were staying in a little town called Panagurist, which is a really cute little town. But Bulgaria is awesome. I'm going to go back so I can head over to the Black Sea?
Yeah.
Which is the eastern end of the country. I didn't make it there, so it's on my list to go back to Bulgaria. But the food is awesome. It's kind of situated, hope I don't screw up the geography here, but it's basically between the Mediterranean and then north of it you have like Eastern Europe and Russia.
Okay.
So it's got these influences from that Eastern Europe, Russian influence from above, and the Mediterranean below, in all aspects of its culture, food, music, the way that people look. It's kind of like mixed in that between those kinds of like features, and it was awesome. It is a beautiful country, and the food's fantastic, and it's cheap.
Very cool.
It's very inexpensive. The American dollar goes a long way.
Oh, hell
yeah. And it's easy to get to. You just fly through, like, we went through Frankfurt
Oh yeah,
on the
Germany.
way. And you can get
Yeah.
you can get a direct from Frankfurt from
They
most
seem to
American
be the hub
cities.
for everything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
They have
Especially
the
for us.
cleanest airports. Mm-hmm. Like, the smoking lounge in the Frankfurt
Yeah.
airport.
Yeah.
I swear to God, it's like
just-
everything is pristine.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's not
nice.
even an ash anywhere. Like they
Yeah.
must clean it like every 15 minutes.
Right.
But
Meanwhile, you go to Vegas and it's just
yeah, it's just a
shit show.
shithole. Yeah. But yeah, and they have like the coolest airport.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can get a big old stein of beer. We
Mm-hmm.
landed at like 9 a.m. and had a 5-hour layover.
Yeah.
We just like had a few steins of beer at like
Hell yeah.
9 a.m. It was
That's
great.
killer.
It was amazing.
That's killer.
But yeah. If I had to pick a third,
Mm-hmm.
I really like Ecuador.
Ooh.
Ecuador is it's kind of a tie. Ecuador and Colombia. Those are
Cool.
Those are my two favorites in South America. Mm-hmm. I was in Colombia for 2 months last summer, and yeah, it's a really beautiful country because it has such a diverse terrain. Mm-hmm. You've got mountains, you've got the Amazon rainforest, beautiful beaches, and this all goes for Ecuador as well. They're slightly different spots, but yeah, they have sort of similar diverse topography.
Yes.
And great food. We actually, after the gig was over, my girlfriend flew down and we spent about 2 weeks traveling around. We did Bogota, Medellin, Cartagena. I would say if you're going to Colombia, the number one place would be Medellin.
Yes.
It's cool because it's nestled in the mountains. It's in a bowl. And so they can't build out, so they built up.
Kind of like
which makes it,
Chattanooga.
yeah, kind of. It's
With
a
the
really
mountains.
walkable. Yeah,
It's like a valley.
like
Sits
that,
in a
but
valley.
even more
But even
condensed.
more.
Yeah, because they're completely, you can't like get out except through the mountains.
Yeah.
Like there's no flat land in between mountains. And
Right.
so, yeah, they had to build up, which makes it a really walkable city. So we didn't even rent a car. We just walked
great.
everywhere. Yeah, they had the best steak possibly I've ever eaten in my life was in Medellin. It was a place called Don Diablo. Oh, man, I still think about that. It was
That
really,
sounds
it's
great.
one of those places that they bring out a little case with like
Yeah.
6 different kinds of knives in it, and the
Oh,
lady
yeah.
lets you pick which knife you want.
Hell yeah.
That's
dude.
a nice touch. It
I
was
love that.
cool, man. Yeah, that was our favorite. We went paragliding actually over the city.
That's
And
cool.
I hate heights, man.
Yeah, man, I hate 'em too.
That's my one. I guess if
it's
I have a
exhilarating
phobia,
when
it
you
would
get-
be heights.
Yeah.
I don't know what the.
But it makes it exciting.
Oh yeah,
The fact that you're scared of it. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
That's kind of
And
why I
isn't that
did it.
kinda what
Like,
we're talking
we'd
about
run
here?
off, and I was like up there for like 5 minutes.
Right.
And I was like, okay, this is cool. I was like, we can go back now. And the dude was like, oh no, sorry, because you have to gain elevation because you run off the side of a
Yeah.
mountain and you're kind of gliding down, and then you have to catch some wind, and you do this corkscrew thing to gain your elevation back to where you can loop around and come back down and land where you took off. It was gnarly. You feel every little slight change in the wind, and every time I'm like, oh shit, here it goes. I remember I kept looking down, and for a while I was like, all right, if I fall from here, I might make it. And then eventually, once we got off the mountainside, I was
Right.
like, all right, Like, if this doesn't go right, we're screwed.
And
But
ladies
it
and
was
gentlemen,
amazing.
I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but isn't that kind of what we're talking about here? You know what I mean? That feeling and, you know, playing with that fear, that's kind of what we're talking about, man. I think that's a great little anecdote there. Yes, there is a such thing as you know, there's a difference between stupid and being
Yeah.
you know.
Don't go paragliding by yourself.
Right.
Go with a pilot.
But you know, if that fear can remind you that you are alive, then maybe that's a good thing too.
Oh, it definitely did that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Last question. If you could go back and tell your younger self anything to prepare for an unconventional and free-spirited life, what would that be?
I guess specifically in my case, it would be to learn languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
hell
really
yeah.
wish I had done that when I was younger. My Spanish is like okay, especially if I'm in a country for a couple weeks. It comes back. It's never great. I can get by.
Right.
And I'm learning French now because my girlfriend's French.
Oh, that's
I
sweet.
wish that. I mean, I have friends. I'll hang out with her and her friends. And they speak like 4 languages, and they jump between them seamlessly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like a moron.
I know.
The
Well,
dumbest guy in this room.
who knew that
So
we were going to be so globalized, you know?
Yeah.
Now, you know, again, you're living a life, both in your, you know, your romantic life. There's globalization involved here, you know what I mean? And in your work life, you know, 2 crucial areas where you spend most of your time, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That I definitely
That's
wish
a great
that I
point.
could do
I would have
that.
never thought of that.
Yeah, if I could. Yeah, and I'm trying to make up for it now that I'm 42. It comes
Right.
a lot easier if you learn them young.
Yeah,
So,
right. If I would have
yeah.
paid attention back then.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Avery, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate it. This is a great episode.
Absolutely, buddy.
Yeah, I love this. This is so different. You know, this one's, I think, very unique. I think it was worth revisiting Higher Ground. Anything you want to plug? Anything at all? Anything at all?
Not really.
All right.
I mean, back in a year, I'll plug the documentary that I'm working on.
Well, yeah, come
But-
back. Yeah, I know about that documentary. So, you know, yes, let's talk about that more and more. Love to have you back. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Let's,
Salud.
here's to unconventionalism.
Here's to that.
If that's a word, I don't know.
Probably.
See you later, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See you next time.
You can find